Yeah, welcome to another episode of the Racer X Exhaust Podcast, brought to you by Yoshimura. The world continues to change at a rapid pace. Hey, Yoshimura's kind of keeping up, though. They got that all-new RS12 exhaust system. Looks different, sounds different, and performs better than a lot of previous technology four-stroke exhaust systems. They're rolling it out for different bikes. They got the Yamaha YZ250F version, first developed for the Suzuki 250 and 450 in conjunction with JGR. So go to yoshimura-rd.com. 70 years, nearly 70, I'm going to round it up, 70 years of four-stroke research and development right there at Yoshimura. You also want to go over to racerxonline.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to RacerX. I say it's $30 a year to get the digital and print issue, but let's do some math. That's really a little over $2 a month. $2 a month. That's super cheap. And we'll give you free stickers you can pick from some of the top riders. We have cartoon character, BG Creation stickers, and we'll send you 2 of them at no extra charge. You're going to need stuff to read while we're all in lockdown. So you can read the magazine on your phone, the digital edition. It looks just like Instagram. You just scroll up and down. Or you can read the old school print. We'll send you that in the mail. So go to racerxonline.com/subscribe. Why? Because all of the cool stuff we do that doesn't cost you anything, like this podcast, the magazine is funding that. So fund us, allowing you to have fun. Maybe that's going to be a tagline I'm going to suggest. Yeah, the world has changed so much that in just 1 week, the world of video games, virtual gaming, simulation, whatever you want to call it, has gone from some way off in the right or left field or the underground, out of sight, out of mind, over most people's heads, right into the center of the racing world in just 7 days. Now, there have been motocross and supercross video games for a long time. And on the car racing side, simulator games and also console games like Gran Turismo and things like that have been very, very popular. It works a little better on the car side. You can make a video game much more realistic. But it all got a mainstream boost when NASCAR, without any real races to show, decided to air an iRacing game, which is a simulator video game version of the race they were supposed to have over the weekend. And real NASCAR drivers raced in it and did well. It was phenomenal. It was cool. It really opened the world's eyes to what has actually been going on at an underground level for a long time. And it was so successful, almost 1 million people watched this, that Fox is going to do it every week until real racing is back. So I knew, as that was airing on Sunday, what was going to inevitably happen to us in the Supercross world on Monday, which is, why can't you do this with Supercross? Did you see what NASCAR did? Well, we'd already been discussing it because we have, I believe, the world's foremost authority on motocross gaming on our staff. That's Kellen Brauer, our online content editor. We brought him on board starting in December, so we were ready for this moment. Sport's not quite ready, though, because gaming is not an integral part of training in motocross like it is in car racing. Professional car racers actually use simulators to learn racetracks and learn cars. It's that accurate. It's very close. It actually helps teach them. It doesn't apply in Supercross and motocross. So we can't quite do what NASCAR did. But we did a couple of versions of it. We let the Monster Energy Supercross game run the Detroit Supercross, and then I announced it. So you can go to our YouTube channel, RacerX Illustrated, and watch that. We had a 10-lap race of maybe what the Detroit Supercross that didn't happen could have been like. And then Kellen Brauer, who I interview in this episode here, every Wednesday night he runs a MX Simulator version of Supercross. Ran the Seattle race that's upcoming on Wednesday night. We actually did it this week on our RacerX RacerX Illustrated YouTube channel. But go to Start Your Systems. Look up Start Your Systems. That's Kellen's side company that he also continues to work on, and he hosts these simulator games every Wednesday night. He's the announcer. He helps put it all together. It's just an underground thing that has suddenly become mainstream in the absence of real racing. So how good can it get? What is the current state of motocross gaming? Is there maybe an outlet where we can use this as a complement to real racing like NASCAR is already doing? Let's find out. Here's our podcast this week with Kellen Brauer. I don't think we were this good in predicting, hey, if we hire Kellen in December, we'll only be 4 months away from the only racing we're going to have is in a virtual world.
I don't think we were that smart. I don't think we had it that figured out, but here we are. Who knew?
Who knew?
Dude, like, it's funny because all of a sudden there's all this interest in, like, why don't they try this? Why don't they try that? You've literally been working on this for how long? How long would you say you were online gaming and following the trajectory of that? How many years now?
Probably about 9 years or so.
Wow.
It started back in like late 2011 because this MX Simulator series that we ran on Wednesday on Racer X has actually been going on since 2010. Mm-hmm. And so I started following it back then, and my first way of getting involved with that community was like, well, I want to be a journalist in the sport, so if I have a way of practicing, I could use this series as like a way to interview the riders and get stories out. And so I went that route of it first, where I literally just called people up or messaged them and had them message me back answers about, oh, how did your race go and what do you feel about this and that. And so that was my first way into it all, but I've been kind of tracking the way that this whole system has gone for like 9 years now.
So you were going to interview those that were participating in the game? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. No, I wasn't going to. I did.
Yeah.
So I used to write like full-blown race reports as if, like our Saturday Night Live column.
Yeah.
But it was Wednesday Night Live or whatever the races were on back then. Yes, because it was a good way of practicing my skills because I was in college at the time, and I figured this is a good way to learn how, when it becomes a time where I'd actually be interviewing real riders or going to real races, how would that process go? How would I get quotes? How would I write a story? So I figured it was just a great way to practice it all.
Did you publish this somewhere?
I did. Yes, I did.
Where was this?
So I think the website's still up. It was called BrauerBlogs.com.
Okay.
But it might, my license might have expired. It might be like BrauerBlogs.wordpress.com or something like that now.
Maybe you'd want it to be expired. Or is it all good?
I think that they weren't like my best work ever, but it's just kind of cool to go back and see where my writing skills have come.
Oh, I'm glad you see it that way. Yeah, I look back at my old stuff, and it's not, honestly, I don't feel like it's that much different. Like, I can look back at the earliest assignments they were giving me here when I was trying to break in, and some of these things you can't be absolutely horrible and then become good at it. You probably have it, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who's racing pro Supercross probably never really had a time where they were absolutely atrociously bad on a dirt bike.
Probably not.
Right.
I mean, I would take that logic with me as well with riding a real dirt bike because I've never been atrociously good at riding a dirt bike. So I never once had the opportunity to think it was going to be a possibility to be a pro. Whereas I'm sure they hop on a bike at 3 or 4 and they're immediately one of the best riders on the planet.
We're going to go way off on a topic we're not supposed to go off on, but do you love how, like, Carmichael has been gone for so long now as a racer that I feel like it's maybe the story is different, but at least in the time that he was winning and then right after he retired, it was like, Ricky didn't have any talent, man. It was just all hard work. And I'm like, stop it. He kicked everybody's ass at 8 years old in a 65. He had talent. Stop with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's every time someone's coming through the amateur ranks and is winning a lot of titles, you go back to Carmichael or you go back to James. Like, these guys were unbelievably gifted and talented their entire career.
Yes.
And it just so happens that Ricky had to dethrone probably the best Supercross rider or best rider ever at the time.
Yeah.
So he had to work extra hard to do it. But yeah, he was super talented.
Right. 90% of his wins at almost all of his ages were coming if he did the same amount of work as everyone else just because he was talented. To dethrone McGrath, that took an extra ridiculous push the world had not seen before. But
yeah, I mean, do you think in 98 when he pretty much won everything on the East that he was working as hard as he was in 2001 to dethrone the king?
No, that
was talent.
He has talent. Yes, he has talent. Okay, so this in the gaming world, tell me about this MX Simulator thing, which you've been doing for a while, and the game's been around a while. What the heck is this game? Is this like a one-shot this game ever came out? Like, what is MX Simulator? It's not a console game. Like, it's not a PlayStation game or an Xbox game, right? What is this?
Yeah, so it's a game that was essentially kind of a beta project by a Linux developer in New Jersey that just started throwing stuff together back in 2006, 2007. He had a soft release of the game in 2007, so there's some people that I've met that had the game at the very, very beginning, and they have really low user identification numbers to prove that they had the game that early. But he basically launched it with just the idea of like, let's just try to make this cool little game that feels realistic. It's got a lot of data that goes into it that kind of makes it seem more realistic than it really is. Like suspension data, he has a lot of different arcs and figures that go through that whole simulation aspect of the game. And he was really instrumental, I think, in the first couple of years of like pushing this out here and trying to get people to play it. But he's also been very careful to be like, okay, but some of these user created things that people are doing is not my thing. So from like 2010, 2011-ish onward, he kind of took a step back, and everything since then has been pretty much user-generated content. The tracks, the bikes, the skins, the pretty much anything that you can see in the game was made by someone who picked up the game, enjoyed it, and then decided, well, let me go into Blender or 3ds Max or all these different programs and actually create things for the game. And that's why it kind of exploded, because there's so much creativity. You don't have that creativity with console side gaming because you can manipulate files and modify the game very much, but PC you can. So people just took it and ran with it, and there's just a plethora of custom tracks out there. Like you think of almost any local track near you, and someone's probably built it in the game, which is cool because people enjoy seeing something that they wouldn't normally see in a video game end up in a game that they can play. And it's been kind of developed pretty slowly the last 5 years. Like the game creator, he's getting pretty old at this point. He's in his 50s. And he just kind of took a step back from doing any development with it. So it's been pretty much just a community project the last maybe 5 or 6 years, where not a lot of changes to the game, but a lot more effort being put in on a community standpoint to actually grow the game still while people are playing it as frequently as they are.
Perfect. Okay, so what we're getting at here eventually, which we'll talk about, is in the car racing world, iRacing and simulators have become very realistic to the point where they are real tools for real drivers to use. So that's why it was very easy for NASCAR over the weekend and in these coming weekends to just play one of these iRacing games as if it was a real race. Because this is literally going on 7 days a week at the highest level, because iRacing has gotten that realistic. So,
yeah,
for the MX Sim, is it hamstrung? If the guy had put the same effort in 2012, 13, 14, 15, all the way through 2020, would the game be better? Are there certain things you're like, man, if we had 8 more years of technology, it'd be this much better? Or is the user-generated stuff able to make up most of that gap?
The game would definitely be better if he kept putting in effort, but kind of the biggest hiccup that has hindered him the most is he actually built the game in a source code called OpenGL, which is now pretty outdated. Mm-hmm. And a lot of newer games are built in different game development aspects. So the graphical implications of the game are way behind. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really hard on your computer because, and this is going to sound kind of nerdy and not many people would know what this means, but you can only run the game through one core. So a lot of your processing units in your computers have multi-core capabilities because it's trying to bounce projects of games and development off of each other to actually give you the best output for gameplay, but it can only run off of one core for sim. So if you have like a quad core processor, you're only getting 25% of your actual processing power out of it to run the game. And because of that, a lot of people pick it up one time, the game lags horrifically for them, so they can't even play it. They don't even move around that much, and then they put it down and they never play it again. So it's really hard to build a community because he's almost hindered himself with what he built the game with, because now he can't change the code. It's hard-coded in. He can't go back and rewrite all that code because it was super long, tedious process. And so he's pretty much just said, this is good. I'll just let it run, and everything from here on we'll just let the users create, and it'll run its course eventually.
So does the community that plays this game, do they just live with this dream every night where they wake up thinking, maybe a new one will come out? Is that a huge, huge, huge wish, goal, dream that everyone would have?
Yeah, it's been a joke for years that MX Simulator 2.0, it's coming out eventually.
Yeah.
He still releases updates to the game, but he calls them update 1.8, update 1.9, update 1.9.5 or whatever. So it's we're creeping towards that MX Sim 2.0. He's going to just completely redo everything. But like I said, he's I think he's pretty well off. We don't know much about him. He's not a real public guy, but he obviously made a pretty good amount of money from this game. He sold it for $42 from day one. It's still $42 today, and it's just him. There's no other developers on the game, and he's sold, I think, like 40,000 copies of the game. So, I mean, for a small little basement project where he basically just wanted to try to make the most realistic motorcycle game that he could, it ended up being pretty profitable, and I think he's pretty happy to just ride the coattails of that and not try to produce much more.
And is this an impossible thing for anybody else to do? Like, there's just not a good chance that someone else comes along and does it?
Well, it's not impossible, and lately there's been more kind of simulated games that have been in development. The biggest one that everybody's getting into right now is a game called MX Bikes, which is made by a developer by the name of Paboso, who created a game called GP Bikes, which is street bike racing.
Okay.
And he tried to port those files and that system over to create this MX Bikes game, and it took a really long time to get it to where it is now, and it's still not perfect, but it's definitely a lot better than it was. He's on beta 14 or beta 15 of the game now, and that's been 5-6 years of development, and it's coming around, but it still needs a lot of work, a lot of people think, and it's become more user-friendly. It became available on a downloading platform called Steam, which is a lot of PC gamers use it to download games that they can play with their friends because it's a really easy service to connect with other people and play the game together. But he's working towards making it so that it's a more usable platform like MX Simulator became. It just still is behind in a lot of aspects. Like the big thing that Sim has going for him is the creator of the game coded in really good network coding for the game, so when you play online, pretty good. Like, the problem that you'll see with NASCAR racing on the weekends is drivers will like drive through each other, and that's an issue with a thing called ping, which is how many milliseconds it takes from where your gameplay is to how long it reaches someone else on the other side of the world.
Okay.
So that's why you'll see guys like driving through each other, because on their screen they're not touching anybody, but on someone else's screen he's whatever, like 300 milliseconds back, and so he's going through these people on your screen, but on his screen he's 2/10 up the road or something like that. So the game creator of Sim worked really hard to fix that issue, and even when you're playing with someone on basically the other side of the world, it's pretty good. You still get kind of these weird lag spikes and people get hit pretty hard and stuff like that, but MX Bikes isn't really that close with that. If you get a server of more than like 12 people start going invisible. You don't even see other people on the track. You're in the middle of a race and suddenly someone's inside of you and you're getting punted off the side of the track and stuff like that. But in MX Simulator, we run full 40-man gates for like outdoor national racing, and it's pretty spotless. Like, you can have good close battles with people, bang bars, and for the most part, there's not much problems with it.
Okay, so that's the MX Sim world. So let's go to why this is a topic right now. iRacing, which has been around a while, it's already very popular. Maybe mainstream USA doesn't know about it, but it is a huge part of the car racing world. NASCAR, sports cars. I mean, my neighbor down the street does some IMSA racing, and he's got a rig at his house. This is not new at all.
No.
And companies like here in NASCAR USA, where I live, there's supposedly like the world's greatest simulator that Ford owns. It's like a multi-million-dollar setup. It is an integral part of car racing. I don't know how much you look into the iRacing world. I got to imagine it somewhat crosses over. They have a huge advantage. When people say, why don't you just run Supercross races like NASCAR just did? It's not really the same, because that is actually part of their job to do it.
Yeah, and I don't play iRacing anymore. I did own it from about 2015 to 2017, and it's a really, really good system. And the benefit that they have that none of our moto games have is they have a team of developers working on improving it every single day. So they have 3D scan tracks coming in. They have new, brand new, completely new car systems coming in. So they added like trophy trucks for doing like dirt racing, and they also added like actual dirt midget racing with like sprint cars in dirt ovals, which was unheard of before because they had to manipulate the dirt and all that stuff. So they have a really strong team of developers working on it. But what you're saying is right. It's much more of a true simulation. You can get that with a car because the physical movement of the person is not that much. You're usually strapped in with 5-point harness in a regular car, so you're not moving much anywhere. The only input you have is with your feet and your hands, which is pretty easy to kind of create in your living room. Like you can just have a regular seat and a chair, a couple foot pedals and a steering wheel, which is the same setup I had when I played the game. And it's pretty realistic. It's got a lot of good force feedback. They go off of real world data when it comes to tire wear and camber adjustments and, aerodynamics and things like that. So the manipulation of the cars, like if you're in a straight line in a NASCAR where you get on someone's quarter panel, you can drag up alongside of them. They've coded stuff like that into the game. It's made it super realistic. And that's why a lot of people use it as a true simulator to see what the track is going to be like or test themselves. You can't do that with a dirt bike, though. You can't feel what it feels like to lay over and nearly drag bar in a rut. That's almost impossible because your body's moving so much, and you can't get that force feedback on your body. The closest thing that we've ever had is someone's built a rig of just handlebars. So you have your clutch, you have your throttle input, and you have like brakes on your thumb, and you can move the bars around and stuff like that. But that's about as close as we can get to what it feels like to actually be on a real dirt bike while playing these video games. So they have the simulation aspect of it down much more so in NASCAR, just because it's easier to simulate the feeling of driving a car than it is the feeling of riding a motorcycle.
Right, so when that NASCAR race was on television, everybody's saying, why can't we just do this? But here's the difference. Denny Hamlin, the actual Denny Hamlin, actually won the race, and the actual Dale Earnhardt Jr. was right there. Would Eli Tomac and Ken Roczen, do they even play video games? Do you have any idea if they'd have any skills at this whatsoever?
So, I have no idea about Eli. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah.
But Kenny, I do know that he played games pretty frequently. He was in the first Supercross game, and he actually built himself a little bit of a following in that game because he started releasing a lot of tracks that he would name KR _ and then the name of whatever the track that he released.
Whoa.
Yeah, so he was pretty into that game, but he hasn't been in the last 2 Supercross games, and I think that his agents probably were like, yeah, don't play it, don't post about it, because they didn't sign a contract to get you in the game. So those 2 guys are out, I would say. But there are some people that I've seen, like Josh Hill, I know plays the game pretty frequently. Like he's always posting on Twitter or in his Instagram story saying like, hit me up, here's my gamer tag, let's race together and stuff like that. There are people out there that play it, but as you were saying, it's not like it's a true simulator. I don't think Josh Hill would be a lot better than some living room. But, I mean, you could say the same thing for iRacing. Some kid in his living room is probably better than Denny Hamlin racing an iRacing NASCAR car. But Josh Hill isn't going to beat a lot of some of the best gamers in the world just because he's really good on a dirt bike. It's just if he plays the game enough and is good enough at the game,
right,
he'll be better than us at it, but he won't. It's not just because he's good on a dirt bike, he's going to be better at it than us in this game.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Denny Hamlin is probably better than 90% of the iRacers because of his actual driving experience.
Yes.
Whereas Josh Hill is not getting any advantage in the dirt bike video game with his dirt bike riding.
Yeah, experience. Like you've seen this. You went to the Monster Cup launch events before. These guys, they pick up the controller for the first time, and I'm sure that they expect it to feel a certain way. And so they play the game as if it was going to feel that way, and it's a disaster. They case everything. They're in the wrong gear. Yeah. They're flying into the tough blocks. They're landing in the grandstands. And it's like kind of funny from our perspective because we're like, these guys are some of the best riders in the world on a dirt bike, but they look like complete noobs in a video game. Yep. But that's just because it's not even kind of comparable to real life.
Let's see which direction I want to go here. First, I'm going to say, I know that the video game thing and the fact that it's so popular in car racing is going to make people scoff or laugh or whatever. But I'm going to give everybody the opposite perspective. In NASCAR and in car racing, they actually think this is a good thing because in car racing, if you have talent, if you're a teenager and your goal is to race NASCAR, the line in the sand is drawn with how much money you have. You cannot overcome equipment in car racing. You can't. If you have the slowest car, you can be the best driver, you are screwed. So the car racing world has always been in a tough spot where how do you separate driving talent from which kid has the money? And it's either money the kid actually has, like through his family, or he got sponsorships. It's never been fair. It's never been a democratic process. But iRacing is getting so good now that they believe they're at the point where you can really tell if someone could be a good real race car driver based on how well they do in simulator, which doesn't require, like, you can't just spend more money in it and be better. Mm-hmm. So William Byron, who actually is the guy who eventually took the ride of Jeff Gordon, that's how he started. He started in iRacing. And had iRacing not existed, maybe he never even gets to show he has driving talent. So I know people are going to scoff at the idea that video games prove anything to anyone, but it's actually become maybe the most fair way to figure out who deserves a good ride in NASCAR that there has ever been. So I'm going to tell people that so they realize it's not all jokes. It's actually kind of nice in a way.
Yeah, honestly, I've probably met more real-life drivers through playing video games than I would if I just walked around the pits at a NASCAR race. Like, I literally interviewed to be someone's, like, social media manager / website runner, that he won the Gran Turismo World Championship and earned a, like, full factory BMW drive in the German Touring Car Championship.
But that's, like, legit, because they know that the Gran Turismo, I guess, is close enough. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, he races the series, and he's pretty good. Like, is he going to beat some of the best drivers in the world? Maybe, probably not, but he could get there once he gets, a little bit more experience in the car. And he already has that base ability of knowing, like, what it's supposed to do in a corner, how to apex a corner properly, how to get laid onto the brakes and things like that. These are all things that people can now learn from a video game, and it teaches them how to go deep in a corner without consequences. You're not going to go into a barrier if you break 2/10 later or something, whatever. Yeah. Because if you go into the barrier, it's just, reset and try it again. It's basically like giving them the opportunity of unlimited trial and error without any damage or repercussion.
Yeah, because each one of those crashes could potentially cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in a real car. And that's why even Denny Hamlin and even these top-level NASCAR guys are even doing it, because they're not even allowed to test. The rules say they can't, and it's prohibitively expensive even if they were allowed. So yeah, it's just a different world they're living in. And what I've been told, because I do have some context over the NASCAR side, they say it's usually like 93 or 97% accurate to what it's like in real life. And now they're literally down to tire sidewall like data and tire wear data. They're saying is one of the last things to make it literally no different whatsoever, 100% accurate. They feel that they're within a few percentage points to being that close to the real thing, which probably blows most people's mind. But I bet if you do it all the time, you're like, yeah, of course it is. We know this already.
Yeah, and iRacing, as I said, they have a development team that is constantly working with these teams or these drivers to make the game better. Yeah. We don't have that ability in motocross and supercross because it's not a true simulator. These guys aren't picking up the game and going, yep, this is exactly like real life. The only thing that needs to be better is, if you had a little bit better side roll on the tire, that would be perfect.
Right.
Like, no one's doing that. No one's giving that kind of feedback.
Okay, so as far as the gaming world on the console side, he told me an interesting story way back. I think even when we were just talking about potentially working here, you would think, hey, the games just keep getting better and better and better every year, every version. But there was a weird chasm, or it's almost like the stock market drop in video game console technology as far as these games are concerned with this whole Rainbow Studio thing. So can you explain maybe the last 15 years of motocross video games, and they're kind of working their way back up now?
Right. So the two, I would say, main developers everybody goes to right now is Rainbow Studios and Milestone. And Rainbow Studios makes, of course, the MX vs. ATV series with their latest title, MX vs. ATV All Out. And Milestone makes two series. They make the MXGP series, which MXGP 2019 is the most recent title. And they make the Supercross series, Monster Energy Supercross 3, the official video game. So those two companies have very different backgrounds. Rainbow Studios started in the late 90s. They put together a couple of games that people would probably remember called the Motocross Madness series on computer back in the day. Yeah. And then they morphed into a console company, and they started producing games like the ATV Off-Road Fury series. And it eventually culminated in them helping to produce under a game studio by the name of THQ, the MX Unleashed series, which turned into MX vs. ATV Unleashed, MX vs. ATV Untamed, MX vs. ATV Reflex, MX vs. ATV Alive, and they were producing all those games under THQ. But when the stock market crashed, THQ took one of the hardest hits of many games in the gaming publishers in the industry, and they filed for bankruptcy in 2011, and that pulled the rug out from under Rainbow Studios, because at the time, they were actually THQ Digital Studios Phoenix, because they were fully owned by THQ at that point.
Okay.
So it was a full stop. They had lost everything. Their servers went down. We didn't have really any motorcycle or motocross game to speak of from about 2011 to 2015. And when they got back to work, because they eventually got a group of people back together to start rebuilding these games, they basically lost all the work that they had before. The only thing that they had was they released a game in 2014 called MX vs. ATV Supercross, and that was essentially the downloadable content that was going to come to MX vs. ATV Alive.
Yeah.
But it was just all this Supercross add-on that they had basically brought. So it's the same, pretty similar code as MX vs. ATV Alive. It's just a brand new game that they released with new tracks and stuff like that. And they've slowly progressed back to a point where the MX vs. ATV All Out game is a completely new game. They started from the ground up. They rebuilt everything. They didn't use any of the same old code that they had before. And why people were upset with all this is a lot of people go back to MX vs. ATV Reflex, which was released in 2009, as the end-all, be-all, the real transition point that they figured it out. If you go back to 2007, they released a game called MX vs. ATV Untamed, and it was the last of what I like to call the lean back, wide open method of everything.
Okay.
That's what it was. It didn't matter. If you were wide open, lean back everywhere, you were going fast. You could 5 into a rhythm out of a corner, no problem, because it had a preload system. And MX vs. ATV Reflex changed this entire dynamic. They added a terrain deformation so that the tracks actually changed throughout the race. They added a whole new system called rhythm racing, which is if you get the right landing on a jump, it'll actually kind of propel you forward a little bit better instead of landing in transition, stuff like that.
Yep.
So it was like pretty similar to real life. Like you land on the face of a jump and take off the next one by preloading and tripling into the corner or whatever like that. It made it so you actually had to be precise. But the biggest thing that they got right was the air physics, which everybody always complains about. They got whipping perfect. They got scrubbing pretty damn close to perfect. And no other game since then has even gotten close. Like everything else has felt clunky, wrong, off. They just haven't gotten close. So everybody always begs, when is MX vs. ATV Reflex 2 coming out? And it's not going to happen because they lost basically everything when THQ went out of business. They filed for bankruptcy, liquidated all their assets. Everybody went and had no job for a couple years. So that's MX vs. ATV's story. But Milestone, they came into the motocross scene in 2013 with a game called Mud, which was horrible. It was a terrible game. But it was their starting point. It was essentially, if you go all the way back to the first ever console games released by Rainbow Studios, the ATV Alpha Fury series and all that stuff, like that was where Milestone was trying to get in on the ground floor. They had already made the MotoGP series for, I think, 4 or 5 years before they got in with motocross. So they made Mud, and then a year later they released their first MXGP title, and it was significantly better than Mud, but it still needed work. And they've just slowly tried to build their own system out, and everyone's like, why aren't you building Reflex? And it's like, well, they're not that company. They didn't produce Reflex. They had nothing to do with Reflex. So they aren't going to go back and try to figure out how to do something they didn't do in the first place. Yeah.
It's the same, is it any of the same people?
At Rainbow
with Rainbow, I guess Milestone is different. Milestone's not even the same people, but even at what you'd call Rainbow, is it the same people that did Reflex? Just they lost their stuff? Or it's not even the same staff?
It is some of the same people. A lot of the memorable faces people would remember from Rainbow Studios, like a guy by the name of Elliot Lyons, Dan Mitre, Chris Riesenberg. They all left, but some of the same faces are still at Rainbow, like Dave Knutson. He worked on the game back then. I can't remember the guy's name, but I wish Mike Mamula still works there too.
Oh yeah, even I know him. He does all our track maps for even when you watch People probably don't realize this. Like, when you watch the track map on Lucas Oil Pro Motocross, the TV show, yeah, he does MX versus ATV the game, and he builds our track maps.
Yep, exactly. So he's a level designer there, and so is Stefan Roncada. So he is a level designer of that series as well. But the infrastructure of the company changed entirely because they lost their parent company. So when they rebuilt from the ground up, they brought in a new CEO or president called, his name's Ken George. I'm not sure. I think he's still there. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple different, hierarchy changes within the structure. So the way that they're going is a lot different than what they were before because the entire management system is different. But a lot of the same pieces that you may remember from back in the day that were actually working on the game and not actually coming up with ideas for the game are still there today.
Okay, so you're saying Reflex 2009 was kind of the pinnacle. There's been many MX versus ATV under that title since then, a couple more. But even the one that came out, did one come out last year, right?
It came out in early 2018 or late 2017.
Okay, so the latest one is 8 or 9 years past Reflex. Is it still not as good as Reflex? Do people still like Reflex better for certain things?
Yeah, absolutely. People still love Reflex better.
Wow.
I think there's a good amount of, I would say, like younger gamers because they weren't really old enough to understand Reflex at the time that really do like All Out, and that's good. Like, I think that's healthy for the community to have people that actually enjoy the game because it's going to keep pushing the developers forward and want to make new games for us instead of complaining constantly. But there is still a huge group of people, particularly like my generation, that Reflex was the end-all be-all. I mean, Reflex is still a game where people are making content for it and playing it. There's actual series going on in that game still today.
Wow.
So, yeah, people are still all about Reflex.
Okay, so what I'm getting at here is, same thing I was saying about this MX Sim. Is the world saying, man, if we could have MX Sim now, based on the technology that exists today, it would be a dream come true. And I guess the same thing. Video games, console games have gotten better. If you could just take 2020 technology with 2009 software code that they've lost for Reflex, is everyone dreaming of that? Is that that's the dream everybody wants?
Pretty much, yeah, because I think the biggest thing that falls short on Reflex is graphically it's not really there anymore. It looks good, but when you go and play one of these new games, like you've said, they look so great. Like, they have such good quality and detail on every rider and on the jerseys and the bikes and the ground physics and the stadium ambience, and all those things look fantastic, like way beyond what they used to be. And so everyone wants to see those graphics on a game like Sim or on a game like Reflex, and it'd be heaven for them.
So how are these milestone games, this Supercross game? I mean, I'm just looking at it, to me, it's awesome. Because I remember, I'm a lot older than you, sadly, but even you are probably old enough to know that, look, as a kid growing up, if you're into motocross and Supercross, it's not as easy as being a fan of mainstream stuff where every toy, every game, anything you want all the time is available. It's just hard to find motocross and Supercross stuff as a kid. So I see that video game, Monster Energy Supercross 1, 2, or 3, and I'm just like, that is so cool that there is a game that bothered to 3D face image what Blake Baggett looks like and make sure his gear is accurate. I think that is so cool. Do people like it, or is it like, but the gameplay, or is it fairly well received anyway?
It's gotten a lot better. I think that initially people were just, why isn't this Reflex?
It's just always there.
Yeah, but I think it's gotten to the point now where the game is fun. It's got a pretty good feel to it. Like, if you take the time to sit down and learn it, give it a couple hours and actually get the feel down for it, it feels pretty good. It's got a nice flow to everything. But yeah, I know what you're saying. And if you look back at history, we hadn't, until they released the first Supercross game back in 2017, I think that was, we hadn't since 2001 had real Supercross tracks, real riders, real teams, real sponsors, etc. in the game. Like, we had these games like MX Superfly, MTX Moto Tracks, all these other things like that, but they were all fake tracks, so it wasn't the real Supercross events or anything like that. And it was real riders, but sometimes they weren't even riding the real bikes. They were named something different. They had a different color scheme. So, now we have Red Bull KTM, we have Monster Energy Kawasaki, we have Monster Energy Yamaha, we have all these actual real branded machines, bikes, sponsors, etc. in the game. But yeah, people always fall back and be like, but the physics could be a lot better. If the physics were better, it would be the greatest game ever. But the physics are not there. So it's an uphill battle.
You said the reflex thing, the big thing was how it felt in the air. How are the corners on either MXGP or the Supercross game? Because they're similar. They play similar, right? I would think MXGP and Monster Energy Supercross, they probably feel similarly.
They feel pretty similar. I always struggle, and I've asked them this, like how much they tweak the physics because of the speed difference. Okay. Obviously, in Supercross, things are a little bit tighter, slower.
Yeah.
And they've been pretty honest in saying, like, we don't change much, but it feels way different because of the speeds. Like, sometimes, I don't know why, but, like, the faster sweeping corners in MXGP seem way different than, like, the sweeper in Las Vegas in Supercross. I don't know why. I guess it must just be a speed thing.
Yeah.
But the cornering, I think, is some of the best cornering physics we've ever had in a game, and that includes reflex. Reflex was really good, but everything was overscaled. So you could still go pretty fast in the corners, like unrealistically so.
Yeah.
This game, you have the ability to slide the rear end into a corner like Villopoto used to and power out. Mm-hmm. You can turn tight on a corner and actually get out of a corner pretty good. You can bang bars, all these different things. It still maybe is a touch too fast for realistic abilities, but I think it's a lot better. And that's one of the things I always try to drive is like, yeah, I know the air physics are still clunky. You can't throw cool whips. But guys, like the actual racing aspect of it's pretty good because the corners are really good. And that's what racing is about, is like speed in the corners. You can do the same jumps as everybody else in the rhythm section. But if you're terrible in the corners, you're going to be in 22nd place.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to hear that because the reason I bring that up is because I feel like in the past, a lot of video games, the biggest difference between a dirt bike and all other forms of racing, or at least car racing and dirt bikes, is how you corner. It's just a completely, you don't apex turns. It's just done completely different. So I've always felt that's the problem if you're trying to apply the standard way you would do a car racing game through a corner to a dirt bike. That's not even remotely how it works. Straightaway is the same. You go through gears, you go as fast as you can. But turning a 180-degree bowl berm on a motocross bike and any kind of turn that you'd have in a car race is completely different philosophy. So that's what always would frustrate me, some of these games. I'm like, this is built like a car. It's like you just go in as fast as you can and it starts to push or it starts to oversteer, which is not the way dirt bikes work. So that's actually pretty cool that I think one of the biggest differences, they've actually addressed that. And it feels like a dirt bike, not a car in a corner.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that I don't love about it is there is one defined fast way through every corner usually. And once you figure it out, you just kind of hit it on repeat. The track doesn't really deform and throw you off or anything like that. Whereas, like in real life, obviously in a 20-lap main event, they may go really high in a berm to get a triple in, to a rhythm. Yeah. But later in the race, when that rut gets blown out, they cut down and only double into the rhythm. That doesn't happen in this game. The track doesn't change that much. So I can understand that aspect of people complaining because it's not that realistic in that sense because there's always going to be one same fast line that works every single lap.
Yeah, and I guess if you really look at it, even in real racing, 80% of the time that's the case. It's just they all do the same thing. But yeah, then there's that little extra where it does start to change eventually. It's not like every corner has 4 different ways to do it most of the time, but eventually it does, yeah. Okay, let me ask this part. I know that all video games struggle with the general idea of should we try to make it just as realistic as possible, or do we twist the dial a little bit? It's a video game. We can make it more fun. So in a basketball game, you can make the dunks a little crazier. In a football game, you can make the Hail Marys a little bit better, the ridiculous catches. And obviously in motocross, you can make the crashes gnarlier, the jumps bigger. How do they balance that? Because if you're going to make it realistic, you're going to lose the fun side. If you lose the fun side, you're going to be like, dude, you can't jump 6 jumps in a rhythm lane. That's not real. How do they balance that?
Well, both companies have different philosophies on that. Rainbow has definitely taken a dive into the less realistic side of things. They've almost gone, in a sense, back to their MX Unleashed, MX vs. ATV Unleashed days, where it was you could jump huge rhythm lanes in the rhythm sections. You can do very unrealistic things. You could jump miles into the air and do like a quintuple backflip,
right,
and do stuff like that.
Right.
You can't do that in the Supercross games, and I think people confuse that Supercross is trying to go with the more realistic side, but what they're trying to do is a more authentic experience, which obviously gets confused with it should be realistic. They're just trying to say, hey, this is what a Supercross event is supposed to look like. Maybe it doesn't exactly feel this way on a dirt bike.
Right.
There's some different tweaks and some different things. Yeah. It's a video game at the end of the day, so it's not always going to be 100% real. But they want it to feel like, yeah, the pyrotechnics are going off. You're going to be standing on the podium. You have to select a gate. You have to race all these, different heat races to get into the main event. You have to bang bars with riders. But the Rainbow guys have much more been like, let's just make it fun. Let's make it so that it's almost realistic, but more unrealistic and just crazy and wild, and you can hit huge jumps and you can send a UTV to the moon if you'd like to.
Yeah, so in the Supercross game, like, a quad is the biggest you'll ever do. It's not like they're jumping all the way down the entire rhythm lane in one leap or something like that.
Well, the one caveat to that is in the Vegas rounds, you can't really control people from going fifth tapped into their alley and just launching into a rhythm section. But yeah, for the most part, you can't go down a regular rhythm lane and go 3, 5, 7 or anything like that. Like, you can only get like a 3, maybe a 4 in there. But yeah, at Vegas you can go wide open, and I think because it's based on the 2019 season, so you basically just come in and what was supposed to be like a wall jump into a rhythm lane, it's just wall jump, and you land 5 jumps in and then triple into the corner, and you're at the other end of the stadium already. Yeah, there's the level of realism of you're not going to get hurt if you go big that a video game's always going to have. I mean, we run into that same problem with MX Simulator too. There are definitely times where it's actually faster to hit some ridiculously unrealistic line in the game, but it's just because there's no fear of getting hurt. Like, if we get it wrong, oh well, we crashed and we're on the ground for 10 seconds and we get back up and keep going. Couple other little details here. I thought it was really cool. I think it was Monster Energy Supercross the Game 2, where they added this career mode where you had to do media, and I think they had like the equivalent of, say, like a baker's factory and all that. That's baked into the game, I think, right? How does that play out? Does it actually seem to add something? It seemed like a great idea, but what was the execution like? Yeah, I kind of like that aspect of it, but I've talked to them about this as well, and I think that they just realize it's almost an impossible task. But I think that if they're going to go with a career mode like that, they need to really go a lot deeper with it. Like, one of the fallbacks that these games always have is if you play any other game that you can think of right now, whether it's an FPS or the new GTAs or anything like that, they have such an in-depth story mode with actual dialogue and, meeting different characters and doing stuff like that. And one of the few motocross games that ever got that right was a game called MTX Mototracks that was released in 2003. And it was basically like Travis Pastrana just carrying you through your entire career. You did freestyle, you did Supercross, and you had actual dialogue with other characters. But this game, not really, you can't do that. And the reason they say it's really tough is because they released the game in 10 different languages. So you need to have dialogue in 10 different languages, and you need to pay someone to do that. Because I've said before, like, yeah, it's really cool that you have us do this training thing where we have to go out and we do the same corner 3 times, and we have to try to go through these gates in the corner, and that's how we get experience in the game. But it'd be even cooler if you somehow incorporated a trainer. It doesn't have to be Alden Baker. It could be, Schmalden Schmaker into the game, and he's telling you in a dialogue, attack the corner this way and try to approach it with this and have your foot out and stuff like that. And they're like, yeah, but then we have to translate it into Italian and German and Spanish and French, and it just gets into a long, detailed list because they're not an American company. They're not trying to just sell to the American audience, When you practice this, is this just for your own skills, or does it make your rider actually get better at it? Or is it just for your sake? The new game, the training stuff that they have in the new game doesn't really affect much. The old game, it absolutely did affect your abilities. That was like kind of part of the goal, or trying to make the replayability of it better, where you had to progress your character, which is a model that a lot of sports games have gone with. It's like you start, in Madden, you start off in college, you have to progress your skills. you become quarterback one of the Patriots or whatever.
Yeah.
In this game, they were trying to say, like, yeah, you start out as a privateer, you have very limited skills, you gain sponsors, you eventually start riding for factory teams. And they've stuck with the model in the new game as well, but they've kind of pushed out the whole training aspect of it because people were like, oh, this is boring, I just want to do the races.
I just want to race. Mathis has this vision. These games, MXGP and Monster Energy Supercross, which are based on real riders, there isn't a difference between the riders, right? It's not like as we did the simulation one of Detroit, Vince Friese was banging bars and got second, which, no offense, Vince Friese, he hasn't gotten second in a real Supercross. But there is no difference between Vince Friese's speed and Ken Roczen's speed, or Ken Moxon's speed in this case, right?
They've tried to work on that as far as I've been told. And specifically in the MXGP games, it seems more often that, yes, it'll be Hurlings, Geyser, and Cairoli behind you if you're in the lead, or in front of you if you're in fourth or whatever.
Yeah.
But, yeah, there's still the variable, like you saw in that race, you're saying it wasn't just Friese. Alex Ray finished sixth.
Yeah.
He was ahead of Marvin Musquin and Cooper Webb and all that stuff. And I love A-Ray, but that's not how it would go in a real, normal main event. So there's always that aspect of it where, yeah, maybe A-Ray is on a lesser powered bike in the game, but he could just have a magical race and end up second at any point.
Oh, so the motors, they do try to draw a line with motorcycles? You can make your motorcycle better or worse?
Yeah, so in the game, because they've included factory teams and the ability to ride for different teams in the game. Yeah. That's part of the draw is like, yeah, you can start on the Gas Monkey AJE team, but wait until you ride the Rockstar Husky. It's going to be better.
I see.
Like they try to draw you to better teams because of the better bikes.
Right, but the difference because we all know, right, you could run 1,000 Supercrosses. Sorry, A-Ray. Eli Tomac will beat A-Ray in all 1,000 if he doesn't crash or get hurt or his bike breaks. But in the video game, it's not quite like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So no idea if that's coming or anything like that, because I would think that's a major line in the sand if they would get to that point.
I think that they are aware of it and working on it because, as I said with the MXGP series, it seems like they've figured it out.
Yeah.
But obviously, being an Italian company, they're like closer to that. They're in the GP scene a little bit more frequently, so they understand that side of it.
Yeah.
And speaking with the developers, some of them are pretty new to the sport. Like, they have known about motorcycles, they know about dirt bike racing, but I've gone to some of these events with them, and it was their first time stepping on a Supercross track. Like, they'd never even been in a stadium to see the event before. So I think as the years go on and they continue to develop it, they're going to start to learn, like, what are the true aspects of the game. Formula One figured it out that, the Mercedes is the dominant car, so we're going to make sure Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas are 1-2 all the time. Eventually, the developers are going to learn Eli Tomac and Ken Roczen and whoever else are the elite guys. They are going to beat the non-elite guys 99.9% of the time. Right,
so if you're a player in the game, that's eventually your goal, like any other racer would be. Can I get to the point where I can battle with Eli, Roczen, and Webb or something like that?
Exactly,
right. A couple other detail things here. To do these, the riders have to do something, right? Do they have to come in and do some simulation, 3D modeling, again, at least of the way they look? Or is this all done just by them being at the races and watching from the sidelines? How does that work?
No, so the riders, and this is all the milestone stuff, they're all scanned at the events. So you may have noticed at A1, or is either A1 or A2 this year, there was a sign right where the tunnel goes into the track that says, Supercross the game scanning, go this way. And it was an arrow and it pointed them over here. And as far as I know, as long as you have your contracts worked out, some of these guys, obviously ask for more money. Some of them are just like, I just want to be in the game. As long as you sign off on that, anybody can go over there. Because I've had people reach out to me since the series went east, and they're like, hey, do you know if they're going to come back and do Seattle or Denver or whatever, which obviously now is a moot point. But they're asking, like, I didn't get scanned at A2. Can I get scanned somewhere else? So I've been like a bit of a gaming middleman between Milestone and some of these riders where they're like, I want to get scanned. I didn't get in the game.
That's hilarious. Yeah, so for the most part, the riders just want to be in it, at least privateer guys, because it's cool. They just want to be in it.
The privateer guys soak it up because for them it's like, holy cow, I get my plumbing sponsor on my shroud in a video game, like that's a selling point for them. They can earn more money from their sponsors by saying, yeah, I got you in a video game.
But I do know that very first year of Monster Energy Supercross, the game, no Tomac. Then Tomac is in the last two. Now Roxman's not in it. So at the very highest level, there must be some negotiations going on for likeness.
Yeah, but we've seen that for years. You go back to Supercross, the game 2000. Jeff Emig is in the game. Ezra Lusk and Jeremy McGrath are not in the game. You go to MX Superfly. Ricky Carmichael is in the game. James Stewart is not in the game. So it's been that way for years. Usually the games that, historically speaking, that the top 2 or 3 riders, if one of them is in the game, the other 2 or 3 guys are not in the game.
That's hilarious.
I don't know how it's always worked out that way, but pretty common. We would have Chad Reed in a game and not have James Stewart, or vice versa.
Wow.
That happened many years in a row.
Wow. What about MXGP, though? That one's pretty good?
Well, MXGP is different because, as it's in Front Media now, they have the rights to the riders in the series. So they just sold the entire license to Milestone. So they get the likeness of everybody. They get the factory teams. They get whoever they want. They have to tell them to come get scanned. It's not like Hurlings can be like, oh, no, I want €1 million. They're like, no. This license has already been signed. You got to do it.
Wow. Do you remember, are you old enough to remember, the last motocross video game I played hardcore was the one and done. It was the most fun to play ever, 989 Sports Supercross Circuit. Do you know that game?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
See, that's why I figure what you folks are thinking on MX Sim, if it could just be today's technology with that game, and same thing with Reflex. That game was so awesome, and it was one and done. And to me, 989, that was Sony, I think, that was a big deal. And what the heck happened? They only did it one time. It must not have been successful. It's really a shame.
Yeah, well, I mean, EA Sports, they made Supercross the game for a couple years there too. And when THQ went out of business and there was basically a full stop on any motocross games that were being developed, there was like a legitimate push in, I think, 2012 or 2013. There was a petition being signed to get EA Sports to make another Supercross game. Like, it was literally going to the desk at EA Sports to say, like, please get back involved. And everyone was, like, making fake copies of the game saying, like, oh, it's real, it's going to happen. It never happened, but, yeah, people are still all like, let's get the big companies back involved.
Yeah. I just know the feeling, again, growing up as a motocross fan and never getting the full menu of awesome things that every other mainstream sport gets. I just know that feeling. I'm not dying for the MX Sim to be redone or Reflex because I'm not playing them anymore, but I know the first 20 years of my life what that felt like when you would see a toy and be like, imagine if we had dirt bikes with this. And EA Sports, they really changed the game way back with Madden, and now it was called Lakers versus Celtics back then, the basketball game, and that was like the dream of like, can you imagine if there was a Supercross game in that? And then 10 years later, it actually happened. It's just fleeting. Trying to get dirt bike toys for my kid right now. It's like sometimes, you get a 5 or 10 year run and then it goes away and you just pine for it, man. So that would be the goal. Like, people are thinking not just another Reflex, but other people make other games. That's the dream.
Yeah, I mean, the real tough part that we have is the two gaming companies that are competing with each other are actually pretty small at the end of the day.
I see.
They're not Ubisoft or EA Sports, or they're not going to have huge budgets to pour into this. So the fact that they can't get everybody in the game is more of a proof in the pudding that we don't have the biggest companies involved, because they can't fork over $500,000 to whoever's asking for it. Like, they have to have a specific budget to finish the game within. And for the Supercross series as well, unlike MXRZ TV, in a sense, they have 2 games that they're developing cyclically. Like, they are under license to actually develop these games. So people are always like, why don't they just stop, take the time, build the right game, actually finish it to completion and make it a good game? And it's like, that's not how that works. They signed a deal with Feld, they signed a deal with Infront, and said, this is when the game will be released for your 2019 season. And they're like, great, here's a check for however much, get to work.
So they have to have a game every year.
As far as the licensing goes for it, yes. Like, the contracts that they're under right now, they are told they need to make it every year. They got a little lucky this year with the MXGP series where I don't know who they dealt with. Maybe it was David Luongo, but he was just like, forget about 2018. We don't need a game for that year. Make a game for this year. So they made the 2019 game and just skipped over 2018 because they wanted this year's riders and tracks and everything in that 2019 game. They even made the Shanghai track before they even raced it.
Wow. Yeah, that goes a long way. I mean, even right now, we're replicating the Detroit Supercross when it didn't happen, but it's a little odd that, it's last year's Detroit track.
Exactly.
It works out okay because at least Webb and Tomac are on the same team. But one guy switches teams, and it makes the whole game seem super dated.
Right, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Do you know then, business model-wise, is this like the series look at it like, hey, we got to get the video game out there because this is promotion for us to get, people to think about motocross and supercross? Or is it just, we got to get it out because that's how we make money? Or do they almost look at it as much as a promotional tool as it is a revenue stream? Because I would think it would help.
I think it's a mix of both.
Okay.
Obviously, these companies are not in business to take a loss every year. They want to make money at the end of the day. But I think that on both ends of the spectrum, Feld and In Front realize if we have a video game that mimics our series, it makes us look that much more legit.
Yeah.
Like, we look closer to, even though they're not, they look closer to NFL or MLB or NASCAR or whatever if they have a video game that goes with their series because they're getting that youth audience pulled in at a younger age because of that. They've tried different ways of saying, promoting these newer KTM or Husky bikes or whatever in the podcast and trying to get youth involved.
Yep.
But if you wanted at a base level, a way to get younger people actually into dirt bikes, let them hold it in their hands for a little bit and see what it looks like to actually see dirt bikes on the screen while they're controlling them.
Okay, so that leads me to the last part of this. So yes, you are very into the gaming scene, but I will tell anyone that you are also as into the actual racing scene as anyone on earth. You do try to marry all your success there with Start Your Systems and try to use that to encourage people to ride actual dirt bikes, right?
Yeah, so I'm well aware, as I'm sure you are, that technology is kind of everywhere today. And while parents would like to say, I don't want my kid watching too much TV or this, that, and the other thing, I mean, sometimes it just comes down to a case where it's like, dad just needs 30 minutes to do, write a story or do whatever. Can you go watch TV? And so I kind of tried to build on that, I guess, model a little bit by saying there's a whole generation of young people that are starting to move over to online streaming platforms of watching things. They're not watching cartoons on Nickelodeon anymore. They're going online to watch either YouTube videos or they're going to their favorite Netflix show or something like that. And so I tried, and when I started the channel with my buddy, it was more just like, we're having fun. We to be honest with you, we used to like curse in the videos and just kind of like be normal human beings. And I wanted to change the model a little bit where people of any age could come watch my videos and be hopefully entertained by them, but it gets, more people drawn into the sport. My favorite thing ever is not talking to people online and meeting people through that. It's when I go to a real track in real life or a real Supercross in real life and people come up to me and say, hey, big fan, or really nice to meet you or whatever, because I'm meeting them at the track. Like, we're actually out riding together. That's proof in the pudding to me that these kids are not just sitting at home playing video games all weekend. We're going to the track, we're riding dirt bikes, we're getting more of the younger audience on the track, which is what I want at the end of the day. I want more and more people to be interested in the sport that I love. So if younger and younger people that are coming online and seeing these videos, if I can pull them away from the Fortnite or the Call of Duty or the Grand Theft Auto or whatever, and instead bring them to watch motocross videos and eventually maybe buy a motorcycle, huge win. I would love that more than anything,
Right, yeah, that's cool. That it's all integrated in. It's not like, I don't care about the actual racing, I'm just into the games. It's not like that at all, yeah. And
I honestly, I think I care about the actual racing more than the games by far, but
I can vouch for that.
The gaming side obviously is a huge way of connecting to people for me.
Yeah.
So I love the audience and the community that I've been able to build with that. But yeah, I much prefer making videos on Racer X and talking about the real races, to be honest.
Real quick, I mentioned your Start Your Systems. You're still doing that. You work full-time for us, but what that is and what people can see if they go over there. It's a website and a YouTube channel, right?
Right. Yeah. So startyoursystems.com. We do a myriad of things. One of, I think, the biggest breadwinners for us is we just basically try to pump out content about new stuff coming. I'm fortunate enough that I have good relationships with both of the console companies that we've talked about, Milestone and Rainbow. So they have worked with me in the past to get early footage out, early gameplay, allow me to discuss it,
cool.
Talk to developers, things like that. So that's one of the big things that we do. But I also try to do race recaps of real life racing on the weekends by playing the game and just talking about the race for 20 minutes. I do that for GPs and for Supercross just so that I can get a bigger spectrum of people. I try to explain to people how the game works by doing tutorial videos and different things like that. So if you're confused how to play these simulated video games, there's a whole tutorial series there. And then obviously what we brought to RacerX Online this week was the online racing aspect of it, where there's these actual series going on in a myriad of games. I've mainly covered the sim one, but many different games are having these racing series where they just get gamers together. They have a little fun, either hour or 2 hour little race where everybody does heat races and main events and things like that. And we stream that. It's kind of a mixed bag of things. We do video edits, we do regular gameplay footage, we do broadcasts, we do news updates. It's all over the place, but it's just trying to get more information about these new games that people want to know.
You've become like a narrator, announcer, quite a bit, voiceover work, and then even announcing as some of these live games are going on. Was that an avenue you were expecting to go down, or was that just out of necessity of this would really enhance covering this stuff, and I'm just going to try to work on it and get good at it? Or is it something you, naturally had a skill in and expected to do, or did it just come as a necessity?
Well, I personally would love to be a broadcaster one day.
That is a goal.
When I was not working in the industry, I had a few ties in baseball because I knew some minor league baseball players and even submitted an application to announce AAA games at one point. But, I've always wanted to be an announcer, and it kind of stemmed back to when I played these games as a kid. When I would play Supercross 2000 or Supercross Circuit or MX Superfly or whatever, you can ask my parents. I would sit in the front room and I'd be like, and Ricky Carmichael goes down. I'm 9-10 years old playing the game. It was always interesting to me to call the game as if I was Art Ekman or Todd Harris or whoever. And it stemmed into I want to be a journalist because I like talking and writing about the sport. But end goal I think would be to be a broadcaster on some point, maybe long after you and Ralph hang up the microphones and everything like that. But it's definitely a goal of mine for sure.
Okay, yeah. So it's not just happenstance that you're doing it. It's kind of something you've always naturally gravitated to since you were 9. Anyway.
The sim thing is definitely happenstance, I would say, because there was already a broadcast team doing it. And when I came in, I started doing some announcing with them, and they're like, yeah, we're done. You can do it. And I was like, sweet. Works for me. So,
bro,
that was more happenstance than anything.
Bro, that's how it starts. But the point is, you were ready when they wanted to hand it over.
Exactly.
You were ready at that time. Yeah, that's exactly how it starts. Just the difference between me, I had to announce quad races in the woods. You'll be announcing in a virtual world, and then someday you'll be telling people that's how it started, and they'll be like, wow, that's crazy.
Hey, if I didn't have to announce quad racing in the woods, I'm fully on board with it. That would be a lot of fun, too.
Yeah, I never really had it. Actually, I still do those TV shows now.
I know.
It makes no difference to me. I don't care. It's all racing. I still like those guys. Maybe I got some heat with Walker Fowler over this Jersey thing right now. I'm not sure.
Whatever.
But I got respect for those guys. I like those guys. I'm friends with those guys. Yeah, it's all the same. When you announce this much racing, you eventually, when you follow it this closely, you end up liking any of it. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's racing. If you like broadcasting and you like racing, it could be whatever, as you've been doing this week, where Parker and Beckett doing laps around the island. Yep. It's still fun to announce. It's kind of goofy, but it's actually fun to call it like it's a real race,
It's all the same. When I first started going to GNCC, it's like I'd end up having these bench racing conversations, and it was no different than talking about the Supercross last night. I'm just talking about Shane Watson, Rodney Smith instead, but it was the same basic conversation. Now I'm doing flat track. Who's going to win the title this year? What about this guy and his team? I heard this guy's in better shape than ever. It's all the same. It doesn't matter. Yep. All right, well, this is cool. Maybe someday you guys will get your Reflex or MX Sim 2.0.
Fingers crossed.
I feel so sad for you guys. you have this, almost everything in life just keeps getting better and better, but you guys are still on the 09. If we could just get back, to 09 level.
Yeah, I released a new video. I'm like, hey, check out this new game. It's got these fun new aspects to it, and immediately it's, this isn't Reflex. This sucks.
That's crazy.
Awesome.
That's weird. You would think if there's one field that would not happen, it's something that's so heavily based in technology. You would think that's impossible. That you couldn't beat what was 11 years ago. But that's what's going to keep you guys up at night. Waiting.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, man. I guess it's back to regular work for us now.
Yep.
All right.
Back to the old grind.
That's right. Okay, see you online.
All right, thank you.
Later.
That's the show. Hey, I had planned on doing a podcast with Kellen a long time ago. I honestly remember telling him this. It probably was November. I was like, I don't know if you'll end up working for us. Maybe we'll, I didn't want to get too ambitious with we're going to give you a job for sure. But I did say, hey, this topic is interesting enough where we should do a podcast about it, whether you end up working for us or not. The good thing was I never got around to it, and instead we did it now when it is more relevant than ever. The things we did this week, me announcing a simulated Monster Energy Supercross race, and then Kellen hosting the MX Simulator race, those two things, if we had done them in any other week at any other time, we would have just been made fun of. Like, I just know it. That's my instincts. But instead, people thought it was fun and cool and interesting, because it's all we got right now. So the video game world is getting its close-up, and we'll see how long it lasts in the weirdest time ever. I hope. Thanks for listening. Of course, thanks to Yoshimura, our title sponsor, and go to RacerXOnline.com, and we'll give you as much up-to-date news. I believe some more specifics on Supercross are coming soon. They did announce this week what we already knew, which is that they're going to run the rest of the races. That's the plan. That was always the plan. I never once heard that they were planning on not holding the races, but it was cool that they clarified this week and actually said it publicly. But what they don't have is a schedule or dates or anything like that. Pretty sure they're working on starting in September, going into probably October. The big stumbling block, of course, where the heck are they going to hold these races? I'm hoping by next Friday maybe we have a little hint, a little idea, but it is going to be so difficult because every event that's not running right now, they're all going to be fighting for stadium dates, we hope, in the fall, because then we hope everything's back to normal. You can get some more insight if you look at Steve Mathis' show. That's where we do podcasts under the Pulp Network. We did a podcast just yesterday, me, Mathis, Jason Thomas, where we took live calls from fans and answered some questions. So we shed a lot more light on that topic. So go to Steve Mathis' show, look that up on iTunes, and keep listening, because what else are we going to do right now? All we can do is talk racing. Luckily, that's what we like. See you next week.